Final hour overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Yo-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan, now up on TSN2. Jake Delhomme later in the hour, our best bets later in the hour. And we'll sprinkle in some confirm or deny here in just a moment.
Yes.
And got a couple of good confirm or denies. Not going to lie to you. I feel like I've set them up pretty well. And Patrick Laine is returning tonight, and that was a big story in the summer when they acquired him. It was a Leaf player that injured him, and remember the reaction and how visceral that was, and Habs fans were going crazy. And they need something. You know, we were talking about Ottawa last hour, and like the World Juniors was in Ottawa. They were hoping their top prospect would be there. They're looking for some positive news here. Montreal's the same boat. Like you can't force anything out of Laine. He's not just going to show up and be a rock star immediately, but they could use some positive press.
I hope Patrick Laine himself understands that in Montreal, like this is not his game though. Like they would need some kind of buzz energy vibe where it would be entertaining and have the puck and flash and dash. But he kind of like I don't know. He's got this loafiness to him where. I just hope he creates energy, and I hope it works out for him. Because let's not forget, Patrick Laine is not only providing a spark, he's trying to get his career back on track.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
It's an opportunity.
These are big 2 years for him, man.
Yes.
Until his deal expires. Big 2 years.
Well, and you know, all the fanfare coming there, he was excited. He looked actually refreshed, obviously, coming back off of a mental health break or whatever it was, and to me, it was a nice story. And to get injured in preseason, it sucks, regardless of how it happened or who hit him, all of that. It's more about him coming back. And, I would love for it to be, for him personally, to be a positive story because he hasn't had a lot of positivity around him in the last couple of years in his personal hockey career. That's a guy who, for fun, put up, 44 his first year, second year, and then hasn't even come close to that, really, from what we expected him to be in his career. So, I'd like it just to be a nice, positive story for him, but he's not going to hit the ground running. It's coming back off an injury.
And he's got a lot going against him because, the team is so bad in the market he plays in. Like, Montreal, I said it yesterday, they're the slump buster for the league right now. On Saturday, the Rangers can't beat anyone. Give me Montreal. They beat them. Boston can't score goals. Give me Montreal. They put 6 on the board. Like, that's where they are. That's their reality right now. They are really struggling. And that market is starting to get, I think, a little bit impatient. And I think they deserve to.
I don't think they should, though.
I think they should. At some point. But, Noodles, they're second last in the
finals.
league.
Was it 3 years ago? Was how many years ago?
2021. That was a long. I hear you. I mean, it's not like that was. Okay.
Yeah. I
mean, so you give me the timeline then. When does 2021 not count anymore? And you say I'd rather my team isn't dead last in the league.
Well, I'm not saying that they should be. They should be better off than what they are. But my point is they're still in a rebuild. They're still in a retool. They've got to get better.
Are. They definitely are.
They're not. I don't think the expectation from day one was to make the playoffs.
I don't think it was either, but I don't think it was 64 points. And
well, I'm pretty sure the buzz was in training camp. They'd like to play some meaningful games. It might not happen, but meaningful games would be nice, and it's not close. So that
not right
if you're going to look at it that way, it's not. It's a failure. Like it's not going well. You can't. Yeah. That's not a hot take. That's factual.
Just a fact.
It's just the truth.
And it's also the market is what I'm pointing to,
right.
Where. There was a time where just because you made it to the Cup final and lost, that wasn't enough in Montreal. Like they've adjusted, and they have to over 30 years.
Right.
But, it's the richest history in the sport, 24 Cups, blah, blah, blah. 3 years in, and they're still not in a great place. That's what I'm pointing to.
Right.
Whether they should be or shouldn't be, I can understand why some fans would be suggesting it's time to get some things going in a better direction.
Right.
I don't think that's unreasonable. To suggest they were going to make the playoffs, that would be unreasonable. That wasn't going to happen. Even if everything broke their way this year, I don't think that was going to happen.
Right.
But, again, right now it's really not going well for them. And now you get Laine returning. And I'm curious to see what happens with the Four Nations face-off and, how many halves are possibly in the running here where, Caulfield's had a great start. obviously. I don't think he'll make
I don't
the
think
American
he makes
team.
that. I don't know if anybody off that team makes it.
Well, I mean, Suzuki was a guy that people were talking. I don't think Suzuki makes it.
I don't think he makes it.
He hasn't played well enough this year.
Well,
Yeah.
and they're too deep, you know?
Well, that's another thing. I mean, and especially the role he's going to play, like a two-way guy. It's him or Sorelli, him or, Bennett or something like that.
Somebody like
Konechny,
that.
yeah.
Like there's guys that are, to me, are ahead of him. That's the way. Or you'll find a winger or, somebody. To me, I don't see. I don't know. They had talked about Montembeault. I don't think Montembeault would be a guy. I don't see anybody on that Canadian team from, unless am I missing a Canadian?
No,
there?
I mean there isn't any. Those are the guys in the running. I mean those are
I don't think they make it.
the guys that would be in the running. And Caulfield for the Americans. Outside of that, there's nobody else on the American side that would make that team that I can think of anyway.
I mean, Caulfield having 16 goals is nice, but it's
pretty
more.
Good.
I think there's
16, man.
I know
it's a lot
a
of
big
goals.
number,
25 games in.
I think it's more where he would fit on that roster. I just think there's other players that would just, if you're building a team or just building an all-star team, there's a difference. And I think I don't know if Caulfield makes that team. I don't know.
And that's an interesting part of this conversation that we had last hour about the World Juniors and about the national team is What are you building? It's not a skills competition. You're looking for different roles. You're looking for different weight classes, different guys who can play physically, guys who have speed, guys who can kill penalties, guys who might play well together. You have to mix and match, and that's on Jon Cooper to find that out.
Right.
So there's a lot that obviously goes into it in terms of them taking into consideration all of the different ingredients. We'll get to confirm or deny here in a few moments. Jake Delhomme will join us a little bit later in the hour. It sounds like the insiders are on SportsCenter kind of telling people what they're hearing, like in terms of the projected roster, and trying to put pieces together and making projections and getting it as close as possible. So as that comes in, we will get to that and let you know whether or not a Montreal Canadian made the team and who else could be on the team and who could be on the bubble based on what our insiders here at TSN are hearing. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But why don't we sneak in a couple of confirm or denies here? You guys ready to play it?
Let's
get the intro going.
I can neither confirm or deny that this is in fact a segment.
Austin trades Andrew Raycroft to Toronto in exchange for the rights to Tuukka Rask.
It's been my honor and a privilege to serve as the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Club.
It's time for Confirm or Deny.
Do you regret giving all those gentlemen the no trades or no movement clauses?
I can neither confirm or deny that.
I can't confirm or deny.
All right, so let me begin with this. According to our insiders, we can confirm, at least projecting what we believe is going to be happening in the next 24 hours in terms of Canada announcing that Sam Montembeault, it sounds like, has made the team, Noodles.
Really?
It sounds like it's Binnington, Adin Hill, and Montembeault.
Wow.
That's what our projected goaltenders are here at TSN, based on what our insiders are hearing.
Wow. Well, he wouldn't have been my
that's
three,
surprising to me.
But good for him. I mean, he's a good goalie in a bad situation. That's the problem. Like we talked about it. He's on a team that is, last place or close to last place, and they're struggling, and he's getting hung out to dry every night. So,
Maybe Donnie Sweeney was in Montreal for opening night. Never know.
Could have been there watching the Leafs pepper him with 45 shots or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Because I got to be honest, after that, I just haven't seen too many performances where I'm like, need him, got to have him. I don't know.
Yeah, he had a shutout like a week and a half ago where he stood on his head
he's been
too.
good.
But he's had a couple. He's been hot and cold, but that team has hung him out to dry. Defensively, Montreal is one of the worst teams in the league. So it sounds, again, according to our insiders, based on what we're projecting, what we're hearing, Binnington, Adin Hill, Montembeault are the three goalies. And it sounds, these are the forwards. I don't know if we can get a board. I'm sure they've already put it up on SportsCenter. Reinhart, McDavid, Marner, Marchand, Crosby, McKinnon, Hagel, Point, Stone, Bennett, Sorelli, Konechny. You're going to like to hear this. It sounds as if the 13th forward is Seth Jarvis. Seth Jarvis.
Seth Jarvis.
Good player.
I like
Yes.
it, man.
There you go. Patrick
Him
Arnold
and
Seth
Konechny. There's some
Jarvis.
snot there. It's just like
it is.
Yeah, and
There's-
Bennett. Like you can have Bennett, Konechny, Jarvis. Sorelli can play a bit gritty and get involved. I mean, it's an NHL tournament, NHL rink. So
Yeah.
Who
there
is
you go.
who is Konechny and Jarvis? Who are we talking about for like months and they're not on? Is it like
Well,
Hyman's not
Hyman-
there?
Hyman
Yeah.
didn't make it. Apparently, according to the it's not. This isn't written in stone, but
It's
it
a
looks as if
projected. It's a projected.
Hyman
list.
hasn't made it. Scheifele, we talked about. Scheifele didn't make it.
That one's surprising. I thought maybe Scheifele would,
Scheifele had
but
a really, really good start. Barzal was a guy. His name comes up every once in a while. He obviously didn't make it. Yeah, I mean, those were the guys. I think Suzuki at the start of the year was someone people were talking about in Montreal. But
Almost penciled in, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
In camp, it felt like he had a really good chance. I think he played himself off the team, and I think Sorelli and company have played themselves on it. I think Verhaeghe's a name that came up from time to time. Carter Verhaeghe.
yeah.
He didn't
Well,
make it.
do you think that
Tom
the coach?
Wilson.
Do you think that Jon Cooper would have been able to weigh in on this, right? Like
Absolutely.
So Sorelli's like one of his guys, but Sorelli's a great player. Brandon Hagel would have been a guy that I thought maybe could have snuck in there. He's had a great start, but I look at some of these guys. The shocker for me is Sanheim.
Yeah, Sanheim. So on defense, it's Taves, McCarr, Theodore Pietrangelo, Josh Morrissey, Colton Parayko, and Travis Sanheim. Parayko and Sanheim. So that means Evan Bouchard not on the team. Noah Dobson not on the team.
Right.
No Chris Tanev, who I'm not sure how close he was to making it. But again, if coming out of a cup final, if I told you Bouchard's not on that Canadian team, you'd say you're nuts.
After watching that
Anaheim.
guy play in the playoffs, I thought he'd be in the one pairing. It was like I thought he was a slam dunk.
Sounds like he hasn't made it, or if he has, he's on the periphery, and things are going to have to change. So there you go. That's according to our TSN Hockey Insiders. As for the Leafs, Marner's on that team. It sounds as if CJ's reporting that we were talking about Cole Caulfield will not be on Team USA, but that Patrick Laine may be invited by the Finns. That Laine could be there representing Finland, which I think would make sense. I mean, he's a big wheel there. They're looking for offense. They're looking for possibly a bit of a jump, and Laine might supply that. But yeah, I think what sticks out to me is no Hyman, no Scheifele, no Bouchard. People in Edmonton, that we were wondering what is going to be the market where people circle and say, where are the snubs coming from? No Nugent Hopkins, no Hyman.
They haven't played well enough, though.
Yeah.
But everybody connected Hyman saying it's a slam dunk because he plays with McDavid. Well,
and he had 54 goals last year and another 16 in the playoffs. The guy had
if there
70
was
goals last
such
year.
a thing as a slam dunk as a winger, I thought he would be one of them, but he just didn't play well. There's no hiding
he's hurt. And he's hurt. Like, he hasn't played. Like, you have to factor in a lot. You haven't played well, and now you're hurt. Like, to me, I think they did the right thing here. Now, again, let's see what it looks like 2 months from now if these guys are playing. Like, that's the difference part. You're choosing it on December 3rd, and you've got 2 months to get your act together, and we'll see how these players, all of a sudden Bouchard could go on a heater, Mark Scheifele could go on a heater, and Seth Jarvis could cool off, and we're going to go, why is Jarvis there, and vice versa. Sanheim and Parayko are surprises for me, but
big time.
But they're
good players. Like
they are
Parayko,
very good players.
Sanheim had a good year last year. But remember, his name came up, like, would Philly move off him because of where they are on the rebuild, and maybe he could be available, and who could be calling on him.
Then he started playing well.
Well, exactly. He played really well last year, and he's played well this year. And Parayko is a solid player. He's a good player, but no Dougie Hamilton. Top 50 Dougie was another guy. Dougie Hamilton was a name that was out there. Hamilton, Dobson, Bouchard, all right-shot defensemen, offensively inclined. None of them on the team. And no Drew Doughty either, which doesn't ultimately surprise me because of the injury. But there was some thought that if you knew he would be healthy, maybe you'd put Doughty on this team.
I'm glad those two Florida guys are projected to be on that team because I didn't hear a lot of their names, even with the seasons they had winning the Cup. Sam Bennett, I love that guy. And Reinhardt's unreal, too. Like, you didn't hear a lot of talk about those two guys from Florida, but they're projected to be on the team, which I think is fantastic.
Bennett is a significant one. Like, Bennett's a guy that played himself into the mix.
I didn't see him on one mock team.
No,
Not
I didn't.
one.
But you know what? Like the other guy too, that I don't want to say snub, but he won a cup last year. He was on the other side of Bouchard. Like Ekblad was a hell of a player. You know what I mean? Like he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Again, it's the riches that you have. If you think Bouchard's more one-dimensional, then you've got Cale Makar. Like he's quarterbacking for 2 minutes on the power.
He's the number one.
And
guy.
Noodles, a lot of it is about trust. You don't think Doug Armstrong sat in a meeting or on a conference call and said, "I really trust Parayko in third-line minutes type situations"? That's his guy.
Well,
and the goaltender's his guy. And for Jon Cooper, he really trusts Braden Point, loves him. Just a fantastic talent. He's a gamer. Cirelli, same thing. And he's seen Brandon Hagel in the last couple of years, and he's like, I'm taking him because I trust him a lot, and I know he can do the job. That's the coach's – it's one of the perks of being the coach. Like, you get to defer to your guy because you trust it a lot, and you almost guarantee that it'll work out. That player will work out because you've seen it enough.
Well, what I find interesting about the left side right now, again, these are all like A, projections of who's going to be on, but B, you have no idea how Cooper is going to fill out his lineup.
Right.
But if you have Reinhart playing the left side, Marchand, Hagel, and Bennett, like Brad Marchand has not been great.
No, he hasn't.
No.
Joe, if you have the boards, put them up there to have a visual for the viewers.
Yeah, Marchand's had a slow start. He had 3 surgeries in the offseason. He's had a slow start. But that's a legacy pick. That's really what it is.
Well, he was already on it, exactly, as one of the original 6 guys.
Well, he had a couple go-arounds with Sid where him and Sid and Bergeron were like
lights
out. They were lights out.
Yeah.
Now,
but what I'm saying is, let's say Marchand, you get to the tournament and he's not playing great. You're looking at Hagel, Bennett, maybe Cirelli. Like if he plays on the left side, you could be in a scenario where like Brandon Hagel's playing with Nathan McKinnon. Like who saw that coming? If it gets to that point,
I think what you might do though, Hayes, you push Sid to the left side and you move Point up.
Possibly.
And that's where you start looking. Like to me, you could make a really really nice top 6 if you start mixing and matching a little bit. And that's where I think they do have the luxury. Like this Seth Jarvis has had
he's a really good player.
He's been a great player,
yep.
And he might find his way in there. Like Konechny. Konechny is a hard working, gets underneath your skin, but he also plays top 6 minutes. Like you could, Mark Stone's the interesting one. And I will say this on Brad Marchand. What do we know of him in a big game scenario? Like, would you take Brad Marchand and say, can I trust him in one game? Absolutely. Like, this guy's a big game type of player. So I think Marchand will be able to rise to the occasion because we've seen it for so many years. Like, I don't sleep on that guy,
I hear you, and I agree with that. And same thing with Sid, but they're not young. It's interesting because, like, Stone is hurt, a lot, and he's been hurt recently. And this is where the Hyman scenario just allowed everything else to kind of fit in. If he made your life easier by playing well and you just said he's on and he's playing with McDavid, you throw a third guy on there and your line's set.
Right.
But because he's not there, you might move Reinhart up, you might move Martin up. Who knows what they're going to do? But it opens the door to guys that we thought maybe were quote-unquote bubble guys actually playing substantial minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're all good players. They're all top-line guys.
And Hayes, you talk about substantial minutes. That board right there, if you want to piss and moan over the guys that are extras or Seth Jarvis or why you're like in a short tournament where you have players like McDavid and Marner and Crosby and McKinnon who need to get out there and get a feel for the game, there's not a whole lot left after that, people. Like
those guys are playing.
Those dudes need to, like, special teams, if there's a lot of power plays, like, those guys are going to be eating up minutes. Like, they got to play.
Yeah, and Cooper, I think, will play them. I think we all know that. And listen, I think as we get closer to the tournament and best on best, and it's not only the Four Nations, it's also the Olympic Games, everyone's got their eye on, an individual player or, a couple of players playing together. I think McDavid and McKinnon, obviously, that pops. Right, that has Gretzky, Lemieux type vibes, like two great players in their primes on the same team. The idea of seeing that, but for me, the idea that McDavid and Makar are going to be on the same team at the same time is even more captivating because McCarr is to the defensive position what McDavid is to the forward position.
Yeah, he's going to get 100 points this year.
Exactly, and he's the clear-cut best guy. I mean, Quinn Hughes is great, and Yossi's good, and Fox is good, and there's a lot of different good guys. McDavid's the best forward. McCarr's the best defenseman, and that's what I think is going to drive this team ultimately is playing McCarr 25 minutes, and McDavid's going to play 22 or 23, and you're going to be on your heels if you're the Americans or the Swedes or the Finns. Like, watch out because these guys are coming. But yeah, it's. I'm curious what our boy Struddy would have to say about this. What people in Edmonton are thinking because Hyman, Bouchard not on the list, and again, Nugent Hopkins was a guy in the summer. He had 100 points. Went to a Cup final. He's a Swiss Army knife. Like, he's a guy that can play every position and play with good players.
I know, but they all got swallowed up when this bad start by the Oilers.
I hear you.
Like, there was McDavid and everybody else was blended in.
I totally understand that. I'm just saying they were also in a Cup final. Like, how do you marry the two? Where when you say, bad start, they should be a little bit concerned. Obviously, Canada thinks that way. Like, is basically saying, I don't think in 2 months Hyman, Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins can help us as much as these guys can. That's a part of the projection as well. Yes, it's been a tough start. Do you think they'll still be in a tough spot 2 months from now?
You don't think those tweets are coming out in 2 months when some guy like Zach Hyman scores 20 goals in a month and everyone's going to be like,
exactly right.
Wouldn't be a bad idea to have this guy. Those tweets are going to
It is coming,
break
but that's
Twitter.
the problem. You had to choose the team on December 2nd, 2.5 months before the tournament. And then now somebody's going to go on a heater or some of these guys on this list. Now, I will say this. Didn't Jon Cooper in his media before the Leaf game the other day say, there's going to be like a bunch of players that'll move around. They're going to have injuries and like I think that's what you're probably going to. This is a bad word to say, but bank on. You're going to have a guy who scores 15 goals up until then. He's going to find a way onto his team because another guy is going to not be available. Like that's the way I look at it.
Yes.
I think they will be a couple guys that have injury or something that they can sub out. And find a space for one of those players.
There will be at least two, I would say, additions, subtractions based on injury. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened almost every position. Unfortunately, it may happen with the goaltenders. And I think Binnington and Aiden Hill were who most people expected. Sam Montembeault being the third guy is surprising to me, yet I don't think you could classify any choice or any non-choice as a snub because of the discussion we've been having for the last 6 months. If it was Cam Talbot, you'd be like, all right, I guess. If it was Kemper, okay, sure. Logan Thompson. Like all these guys, starters, good players, good seasons. But whoever the third guy was going to be, it was going to leave open for debate as to why he would be picked over the other guys in his category. And I don't think it's necessarily a snub. I don't think you classify it that way. I think what's more intriguing is the fact that Parayko's on the team, that Sanheim's on the team, that Noah Dobson isn't, Bouchard isn't, Dougie Hamilton isn't, and then up front, Hyman, Bedard, Scheifele, Tom Wilson's name was out there. None of these guys made the team.
Bedard hasn't shown
TSN and our projections of what we think we'll hear tomorrow.
I don't think Bedard has shown enough.
No, he hasn't. I'm not saying that he should be on it. I hear you, but again, I guess, and it doesn't matter what we were saying in July and August, but that was when everyone was mocking up their roster. In September, the belief was a lot of those guys would be on this team, and they're not.
Yeah.
And I guess I credit Canada for scouting it out and basically going with who they think has been better and more deserving at this point. Wow. And it's an international tournament. It's not a house league game. You got to pick who you think is the best player and going to make the best team.
I think you could argue there's probably 4 surprises, 5.
What would be your biggest based on what we see here?
Seth Jarvis, because he's just a guy that I've always loved as a player, but I didn't see him on that I didn't see him on that board.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's Sanheim. I don't know why. I think he's a nice player. I think it's Sanheim. Montembeault I can make a case for 100%. I just wasn't sure. And the one thing, he did go to the Worlds and play very, very well for them. So there's a history there in that. So you can make a case. But I think Jarvis, Sanheim.
Parayko for me too.
Parayko, yes,
see
100%.
him being in this. I really didn't. I thought
that's a
they
Doug
would,
Armstrong, right?
Well, that's it. And Doug Armstrong is overseeing things. He's technically not the GM until 26. But what could this tell us about where they end up going when we go to the Olympic Games a year from now? It might be tipping their hands to an extent. All right, we'll come back and continue to touch on this report that, again, our insiders reporting on Insider Trading on SportsCenter earlier this hour. What they're hearing, what they're projecting. And again, it's not written in stone, but a lot of these names appear to be on the radar for Hockey Canada and what we would expect to hear tomorrow and see tomorrow when the team is officially announced. So we'll continue to touch on that. We'll get to our best bets. We'll sprinkle in some confirm or denies. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Some news this hour from our insiders, our TSN Hockey insiders, on their projected Team Canada roster and what we're going to hear, in the next 24 hours, or what we expect the team could look like as of tomorrow night. And this is what I think a lot of people in the country have been wondering. I mean, we all knew of the star players that were going to be on it. It was always going to be guys that, the locks were going to be the locks. And even in net, Binnington and Hill, it felt like over the last couple of weeks, they had become locks. That had been reported on, that those two, I think Pierre LeBrun had reported that, like those two were in, and it was more about who the third goalie would be. And based on this projection, it would be Sam Montembeault of the Montreal Canadiens. But I think up front, we've had a few people write us, and I understand why. Is John Tavares a guy that would be considered?
Oh my God! Can you stop with the John Tavares?
John wasn't going to make the team.
No,
no.
Do you think we're a bunch of morons coming on? We knew that it would be an extreme long shot, if not no chance, for him to be on this hockey team. So please stop with the garbage tweet saying we should acknowledge the fact that he's getting screwed. He's not. He was not going to make the team.
Played well though.
He's played very well. And guess Steven Stamkos didn't get screwed. He wasn't making the team. Stamkos was not going to. I think even if he had a great start, I don't think Stamkos was on the team.
No, Sid was the only guy that got the credit of saying you're going to be on this team no matter what.
Yeah,
and
him and Marchand. Marchand got it too. Marchand's not young. He's young. He's older than these two guys. But they handed the keys to those two guys. Tavares and Stamkos were not going to get it. John's been very good this year. He's been outstanding. And the Leafs, I think this is a win if you're the Leafs. Same thing with Tanev.
No kidding.
You don't want
less
them
miles on them.
Exactly. Like Marner's going. Credit to Mitch. You knew he was a lock. Mitch Marner was a lock to make this team, and it's a great opportunity for him to make this season a magical season, right? Because now go to Canada. You might play with McDavid. I think if you don't play with him, you're probably going to play with McKinnon. What an opportunity for Mitch on the grandest stage to go out there and play well, right? Like and maybe start. I don't know if it would change a narrative necessarily, but I don't think it can hurt. You play like a rock star in a gold medal game. That's going to ring out. That's. I think it has the opportunity to be a big moment for Mitch, and then lead that into the playoffs. And if you pop in the playoffs, then everything's going to be all good moving forward. But I don't think it's a bad thing that Tavares isn't there, Stamkos isn't there, Scheifele's not there, Tanev's not there. All their guys on teams where they want them probably to get some rest. Here's our TSN Hockey insider, Darren Dreger. Dregs, we're just talking about what you guys were on about with insider trading and projecting, Team Canada. What sticks out for you? I mean, in terms of the boards, of the lines, the players that made it, that didn't make it, where did your mind go first in terms of what you guys reported earlier this hour?
Well, Brian, probably to what will be perceived as omissions. And I think that most hockey fans, Canadian hockey fans, will look at some of the names that aren't there, right? But that's what makes the process so difficult for Team Canada management. I think we could make a case for John Tavares, the fact that he went to the men's worlds. If he goes in as your 13th forward, you've got a real good face-off guy. You've got a guy who can play the wing, who can take face-offs, obviously. Could be your fourth-line center, a PK power play guy. So it appears, based on our direction, that a player like that is getting bumped for a younger, real aggressive player, nice player, in Seth Jarvis from the Carolina Hurricanes. And, the one thing that is pretty obvious, isn't it? Of the 4-team tournament, Canada is looking to stack up against Team USA. And that roster, when it's fully announced, is going to show that it is a juggernaut. So up front, you know that it's going to be wildly physical, certainly competitive with those young guys and everything that they bring. So I think the reaction from some of the hockey experts would be, okay, does Canada have enough grit? You know, there's no Zach Hyman. I think we can appreciate that given how slow his start is this year. But how do you just erase the 54 goals that he scored last year? The fact that workhorses like Zach Hyman, even Tom Wilson, you know, they seem to rise to the occasion when you're in a work environment like this event is expected to be. And I haven't entirely seen the U.S. roster, but I've got a pretty good idea. So those are some of the surprises for me are more upfront than they are on the back end.
Darren, can you explain to the people that are sending us tweets about certain players, like whether it be John Tavares or their guy on their own home club, like how difficult and complex this process is? Like, these aren't dummies. And the idea of, like Doug Armstrong, Parayko, like there's a connection there. He sees them night in and night out, and he says, you know what, for third pairing minutes, I really trust him in that spot. Connections like that lead to these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly hard. No question about that. And, you know, it's done by a committee. At the end of the day, I guess Doug Armstrong can say, look, you know, I've got some veto authority here as head of the management group. He'll certainly have that when you look at the Olympic team and how that's assembled. But I think that their thinking going into the process was, all right, you know, as much as we liked the way that we played in Vancouver in 2010, the Crosby golden goal, we didn't like the overall look of the team. We were a little loose. So they redefined how they wanted to play, needed to play in Sochi, and it worked out well. And the design of that group was, of course, to take the most skilled players available, but they've got to have a balance of being as skilled as they are, defensively sound, and committed to the details. Canada is okay with winning 2-1 hockey games. That's the mindset of this management group and coaching staff. So I think that factors in. But, you know, I mean, look, Canada could probably ice 2 rosters, right? And Team USA is heading in that direction as well. So, again, I'll repeat myself in saying the reaction of the guys who aren't on the squad, I can appreciate. But the guys that are on it, you know, they're on there for a reason. And management put a lot of time in investing to get to this stage.
Just so you know, Dregs, when you hang up, or probably tomorrow because we're getting late in the show, we're going to do an all-snub team. And I guarantee you they would be an unbelievable team. Like, can you think about that, Hayes? Like, can you imagine that list?
Loaded. I mean, there's, like, obviously Tavares is off to a good start. Robert Thomas, really good player. Lafreniere was a name that kept coming up in New York.
Tom Wilson.
But all the people that we've got, like, in the next 2 months – if Zach Hyman gets healthy and goes on a tear, if you know, if Evan Bouchard, if you know, who was bandied about, if Stuart Skinner, or if you know, Darcy Kemper, like guys who we thought maybe close to that team, you could make a second team and probably would compete very well. But I wanted to go just quickly on the goalies there. You know, Montembeault was a guy. I mean, when you look at it, is he went to the World Championships, played very well for them. You know, on a team that has struggled this season. They're obviously aware of that and looked at his numbers and looked at the bigger body of work of what he's capable of.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we're projecting here, right? And it as we've talked about on insider trading in the past, you look at the Canadian goaltenders, and nobody jumps off the page, you know, similar to what we're going to see from Team USA with the likes of Connor Hellebuck and Jay Goaltender, and I guess we could throw Jeremy Swayman into that mix. But I know, again, in part of the breakdown of Noodles, I don't know if you agree or not, you know, you're not expecting that goaltender to have to make the 10 bell saves.
Right.
What you absolutely need, because the construct of everything around him is going to be sound, you got to make sure that goalie doesn't give up a clunker. He doesn't give up a bad goal in any of those games. And believe it or not, when they looked at Bennington and they looked at Hill, and then to a degree, I'm sure they did the same thing with Logan Thompson and Sam Montembeault, that was kind of what they came down to, was, okay, the safest trio is what? And I think that's kind of what swayed it at the end.
with Darren Dreger, TSN Hockey Insider. Again, the insiders projecting their Team Canada and what we could end up hearing over the next couple of days as we get closer to the Four Nations face-off. I think it's safe to say the snub capital of the country is Edmonton, where Hyman, Bouchard, Skinner, Nugent-Hopkins, I think, was in the conversation at one point.
Well, didn't you consider Hyman a lock, Hayes?
I thought Hyman was a lock. And honestly, put it this way.
You didn't, Dregs?
I did not. No, I didn't. And not because that's my hockey eye telling me that. No. It was because of the limited feedback we were getting. And I mean limited. Hockey Canada, team management for Team Canada locked this thing down. But there's always conversations, right, along the periphery and whatnot. And because of the slow start of Zach this year, but because of the emergence of some other players, including Seth Jarvis, I just think that they look in other directions. But I'm still surprised. And he goes to the hard work areas, doesn't he? And in a short event, a player like that often can turn into one of your offensive, defensive leaders. So I'd put it in my miss list, not having Hyman on that roster. I would.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's what I'm saying, that to use a FanDuel phrase, like what would the odds have been in September if I told you only McDavid's the only Oiler on this team? I think they would have been outrageous odds, because I think a lot of people thought Hyman. I think Bouchard, like coming off the Cup final, Bouchard, Hyman, and Skinner felt like a lock to me.
Bouchard, first right-handed shot D-man over all of them.
And Skinner, considering the goaltending in the country. Like, it's not like he's behind Hellebuck and Ottinger. The guy, he can't beat these three out. That's surprising that the Canadian management wouldn't, put more faith in the fact that he went to a Cup final, but I guess
it did matter, Brian, to be fair. Like, and championships matter more than getting to Game 7.
Sure.
I think we can understand and appreciate that. But I think there's recency bias, which might be a misstep by Canada. We're going to find out when the tournament unfolds. I mean, did anyone have Travis Sanheim on their bingo card going into the conversation?
Zero. Zero people did.
And maybe, with all due respect to Colton Parayko, again, I understand how close he is there. Yeah, I
didn't hear his name at all. No, I didn't. Like Bouchard, Dobson, Hamilton has come up.
Sure,
a lot of guys, and I guess the question is, how much say would Cooper have in all this, in terms of what he's looking for in the team how he wants to play?
I would think a lot, man.
Well, compared to Babcock in 2010 and 14, is Cooper, how would you expect, how does that relationship work, Dregs?
Yeah, he'd be up there, Brian, for sure. And just to be clear, so when you come out of winning gold in Vancouver in 2010, and I acknowledged earlier they didn't love the look of that team despite winning gold, then at that point Yzerman and Babcock took over. And so when they designed the team for Sochi, it's exactly as I described it. Those two guys essentially put the team together and then went to everybody else. I think it was Pat Quinn or whoever was brought, or Babcock was coaching, but others were brought into the equation. I think this was more well-rounded, but Jon Cooper would have had as much swagger as Mike Babcock in this process.
Well, now the questions are going to be there. Who's going to be the captain? Who does McDavid play with? We got 2 months to figure this kind of stuff out, but is it like, if you had to pick two guys that represent this team, and all of these guys would be locks, is it McDavid and McKinnon? Is it McDavid and Sid? Is it Makar and McDavid? Like, if you had to give two guys to be on the billboard, Dregs, that you think will be the face of this program, who would you say that would be?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think I'd go Sid and McDavid.
Yeah,
that's probably where I'd go. And look, again, when we started talking about this several weeks ago, if not months ago, I was looking at maybe the passing of the baton to Connor McDavid as captain, and McDavid basically shut that down, didn't he? And said, no, Sid is the guy. Like, why are you even asking me this question? So I've kind of hung into that since then. But I got to tell you, fellas, like, just to quickly to give you the feel of how our day went today as far as insiders, like, I'm not overly thrilled with the idea of rolling the projected lineup out in the fashion that we did. I will assure you that it is incredibly well sourced, even though I acknowledged earlier that Team Canada management wanted no part of us. But you guys know there's a myriad of ways that you can find this stuff up. But when you've got to submit your roster as they did yesterday, 48 hours before the networks announce it tomorrow night, like, what do we think is going to happen?
Yeah.
So,
no kidding.
And so Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, as examples, are going into that game with the Montreal Canadiens tonight pissed off the world because they thought that they had an excellent chance. And maybe they do through injury and whatever else, right? As you get closer to the event. But I don't know. There's got to be a better way for me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the other side of it. I mean, we're focused on Canada, but there's also the Americans, the Finns, the Swedes, and all their teams, their coaches, the teammates. They all got to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Deal with the aftermath of it all. All right, Dregs, great stuff. Great reporting from all you guys. Thank you for doing this.
Okay, guys, have a great night.
Darren Dreger, our TSN Hockey Insider. All right.
I'm excited for the U.S. roster. I think the U.S. roster is going to be deeper. Like, just on – like, they might have one up front, like, that is slightly deeper on paper. And same thing, like, you know, and, like, D would be close, but goaltending for sure. Like, goaltending,
like, the elephant in the room is the goaltending. Like, and that was always going to be the case.
Yeah, that's
Binnington,
fair,
Hill, and Montembeault is just a wild three-pack for Canada.
Dude, it really is.
It just really is a wild three-pack.
Say it back to yourself, people.
Well, and if I'm Montembeault, I'm showing up saying I might be playing, man. Like, there's no, like, Binnington, he could take the ball and run with it. I would assume he gets game one. What if he gets shelled and he's playing poorly? He'll get, like, they may end up saying we need a guy to play here.
Stinky old Monty's just got to get in somebody's ear and say, give me a decor and watch me go, man.
Right. Well, watch me dial in.
All of those guys.
Yes.
But you know what Dreg was saying is not wrong. All of those guys in certain situations, notwithstanding Montembeault, because he hasn't had the success. Hill has played in a Stanley Cup final and won.
Yep.
Binnington has played in a Game 7 on the road Stanley Cup final, won. So they know the pressure of it. That's the one thing I keep coming back. If you believe this is, you know, all-time pressure, all of that, best on best, or close to it, these guys have at least experienced it. Where, you know, you could argue on paper, you know, Hellebuck, Swayman, Ottinger, none of those guys haven't won. They've never been to the big dance.
That's true.
That
is valid.
From a skill standpoint, those guys are better, like the U.S. team. But they haven't won. They haven't won. Been in a Game 7 in a Stanley Cup final and felt the pressure of it. And you know, like that's the one thing that I don't know what will factor in. But I'm sure curious to find out in that scenario. Right?
We will certainly find out. And I don't. We'll see what comes of the American squad. I wouldn't be surprised if you looked at it on paper and said that team is deeper. But no team was ever going to match the top end of Canada.
Correct.
Like, you cannot, no country on earth can match McDavid, McKinnon, Makar. No one can. Right. And those three are all Canadian.
That is factual.
That is factual.
Just a straight fact. All right, we'll come back with our best bets brought to you by FanDuel and recap what all of a sudden has become a pretty wild hour, pretty wild afternoon. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-games parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Patrick Laine, anytime goal scorer tonight. I think he's going to get on the board at the Bell Center.
Really?
Yes, a goal tonight. A goal for Laine. It just feels that's his guy. That's just who this guy is to me.
Let it rip, man.
Yeah, it doesn't mean now he's going to score 40 the rest of the way. I think it's going to be tough sledding for him this year off that injury, new team struggling. But I think the Bell Center will be buzzing for him tonight. I think he'll be running on adrenaline. And I'm playing the over. They got the Islanders in town, Patrick Waugh. We know what's been going on with those two teams. I think it'll be a bit sloppy. There'll be some goals. Over in Laine, anytime goal scorer, paying plus 403. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Live same-game parlays are now available for every NHL game on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly, 19+, physically located in Ontario. It sounds as, by this time tomorrow we're going to know who's on all four teams for this Four Nations face-off. As for the Leafs, we know Marner's going to be on it for Canada. We know the Matthews will be there and Nylander will be there. Not a surprise, I don't think, again, but no Tavares, no Morgan Rielly, no Chris Tanev. Maybe Stolarz for the Americans. Possible.
Maybe I come out of left field.
You never know. It's off to a good start. Yeah, so we'll see. It'll be a fun one tomorrow. And
maybe get a rep doogie from each country.
Maybe that's a good call.
Around the horn.
Around the horn with the four
Finland,
nations
Sweden, USA, and Canada, and we're all in on the NHL
When are they being announced?
face-off.
Like, what is it? 2 p.m. or is there like a hard?
2 p.m. is the Swedes and the Finns. So over in their home country, it's prime time, and it's I think 6 or 6:30 in terms of what's happening over here. So
yeah,
there you go. Full breakdown tomorrow. It's gonna be a fun one. Leafs back in action tomorrow as well. Raptors in action tonight. So we'll see what comes out of that. All right, good stuff. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.